Hello, everyone. On behalf of the Organization Committee of LACHEC 2020, we would like to welcome you to this session. My name is Lisette Olave, and I will be joining you as a moderator for this virtual tour through the Colombian Gold Museum. Before we start, we kindly request all attendees to mute microphones and turn off cameras in order to avoid interruptions. In case you have questions or feedback that you would like to share, we kindly request to write them in the chat of the session. The Gold Museum in Colombia was founded in 1939, when the Colombian Central Bank began helping to protect the archaeological heritage of Colombia. The object, known as Poporo Quimbaya, was the first one of the collection. It has been on exhibition for over 70 years. After decades of work, the museum was expanded and renovated. With the renovation, the museum organized the permanent exhibition in 5 different rooms, which include archaeological objects and, as well, an interactive room. And now, we are pleased to present Ms. Luisa Espinosa. Ms. Espinosa is a historian who currently works at the Gold Museum and will be our guide for today's session. Ms. Espinosa, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Lisette. Well, hello everyone. I'm Luisa. I work for the Gold Museum, and I'm going to give you a tour of the collection and what we have available on a website that Google, it's called Google Arts and Culture. So we have some of the objects there that I can show you. And like Lisette was mentioning before, the idea of the tour is that you can ask me as many questions as you want, but we're going to do it while I'm speaking, and I'll be just checking in the chat so I can answer the questions as we go along, so that way it will be easier to show you the pieces. So I'm just going to start right here with this object. And before I start, I just wanted to let you know that the collection that we have in the Gold Museum is the biggest collection of pre-Hispanic gold in the world. The collection has 57,000 objects. And in the museum here in Bogota, we have 6,000 objects on display. So from those 6,000 objects, we have here on this website 128. But with these objects, I will try to show you, of course, the most important pieces of the collection and the objects that are considered to be masterpieces. So what we have here right now, it is a small object. And this object, it is showing, if you can see there, is showing a mother and her baby. So when you look at the pieces in the Gold Museum, you're going to notice that there's a big collection of gold and there's a big collection of ceramics. But the gold pieces that we have in the collection, they are not pure gold. That's one of the questions that we get a lot. And it's this idea that everything is made of pure gold. But actually making pieces that are made of pure gold is very difficult. They are very soft. So what people try to do is actually to melt different metals. So what we have here, and all of the pieces that I'm going to show you, it doesn't matter how they look, they are a mix of gold and copper. And if you look at this piece, you will see that it has a color that is, it looks kind of very pinkish or reddish. And it's because of the amount of copper that we can find in the pieces. So that is something that is very important to know, that indigenous people discovered like 4,000 years ago that they could create gold objects. And then they discovered that they needed to actually mix metals to get the most of the pieces and to actually create pieces that will last forever. So this piece that we have right here, it is from a region in Colombia that is called Muisca. And that's another important subject, that here in Colombia, it's not one place that people were making objects. There's 11 areas where people were making gold pieces. And it's kind of all around the mountains in Colombia. If you think of a map of Colombia and it has these 3 big mountain ranges, these are the places where people were making gold pieces, and also some different groups on the coast. So I'm going to show you objects from all over Colombia. And this one is from the center of Colombia. So this region where I am right now in Bogota, it's called the Muisca region. And they were known for making very small pieces. As you can see, this one, I know it looks big on the screen, and of course we can make it bigger and you can see all of the little details that they created. But actually these pieces are very small. They were making small pieces because actually we don't have any access here in Bogota to gold mines. So they were trading all of their gold with people in other areas, and that's how they were getting gold. And that's why they were making small pieces. And of course, because gold, it is a very difficult metal to find. Even though these people had gold and they were using gold, it was difficult for them to find. So we usually find small pieces, and these pieces were created to be offerings. And I'm going to keep showing you some of the offerings later, but this is one of I think one of the prettiest examples of one of these offerings. And another thing that you can see of this mother holding a baby, that's a subject that appears over and over again in many pieces of the collection. It's mothers and babies, or women having children. It seems that one of the most important subjects was fertility. And this is one of these examples. So let me just show you here, go back. And I will show you another example of a woman. This one comes from another region. It's in the north coast of Colombia. This is called Sena. So this will be closer to Cartagena. When I say closer, it's like 2 or 3 hours from Cartagena. But of course, this is the biggest city that is close to where this region is. And they were creating amazing pieces of ceramic too. And this is one that it has also a woman there. So if you look at the piece here, you can see that it's very decorated. This is a clay piece. And you can see that we have a woman. She has her eyes closed. There's tattoos on her arms and on her chest. And she's wearing a skirt. So, and she's wearing some earrings. These are not regular earrings. These are ear expansions, like what people wear today, but only a little bit bigger. So this is something that people were wearing all the time. And it seems that these pieces were worn by the most important people in the community. So when I show you these pieces, what I'm showing you is the pieces that are representing powerful people in these communities. What we think was happening is that, these pieces were actually used and they were worn by the most important people. So here we have a name for the chiefs, the chieftains, and shamans. Those would be the people in the higher classes, and those would be the people that, of course, would be using this type of pieces, and the people that were being buried with this type of pieces that you see right here. So let me just go back. Another very important part of the collection is this type of containers. So this is in keeping with the subject of representation of women. This is another woman represented, but this is a different type of piece. So let me just kind of loading there. So this is one of these pieces that it's a container. So we're going to find in the Gold Museum, there's thousands of these pieces. We have a lot of containers. And these containers are called poporos, like one of the, like when the most important object of the collection, the most famous one is called Poporo Quimbaya. This is another one of these poporos, and there's a lot of them. So when you think about this type of pieces, don't think that there's only one or the famous one, but actually we're looking at a lot of containers. So a lot of these containers have different shapes. There's some of them shaped like women, some of them are shaped like a gourd, like the one that we're seeing here on the screen. So there's many types of pieces, but these pieces are very important because they are some of the pieces that talk about traditions and talk about traditions that are still current in indigenous communities. So this Poporo Quimbaya, it is a container for limestone, and it has to do with chewing coca leaves. So imagine that one of the ways that people were getting energy besides food was chewing coca leaves. So here in Colombia and in other parts of South America, indigenous people still chew coca leaves, and they chew coca leaves because coca leaves help you with not getting tired, not getting hungry, and not getting sleepy, because what is inside coca leaves, it's an alkaloid that it's an stimulant. It makes you feel like you can just go all day and you don't need so much food. So indigenous people discovered coca leaves thousands and thousands of years ago, but they discovered that if you want to get more from the coca leaves, that you can actually mix it with limestone from seashells. So imagine that people were collecting seashells, and then they were grinding them, getting them into a powder, and then that powder was put into these type of containers. So the container that we're looking at here, it seems that it's representing some type of gourd or pumpkin, and it has a little stick. So this little part on top, it's a little stick. Inside, you will find the limestone. You will put the little stick in your mouth. It gets wet from your saliva. You get a little bit of the limestone in your mouth, and then you mix it with the coca leaves in your mouth. By combining these two substances, then you get the full power from the coca leaves. You don't get tired, you don't get hungry, you don't get sleepy. And for an indigenous community here in Colombia, they are called Arhuaco. They live in Santa Marta. They believe that besides that, it helps you with your memory and your speech. So when you chew coca leaves, it is supposed to make you remember everything that you need to remember to share with others. And with your speech, so you can keep talking and singing for hours and hours and hours. So coca leaves have an important value for ceremonies, but they have an important value for everyday life. It would be impossible to actually think of indigenous people here in South America doing anything without coca leaves. Everything that was built in Peru, in Bolivia, all of that, it was because people were chewing coca leaves. And all the things that you see here in Colombia, it is because they gave them the energy. Here, we didn't have the wheel, we didn't have any animals that could help people. So everything that they needed to do, they needed to do it on their own. So coca leaves are a very important part of that. And it's why it is still a very important tradition, not only here in Colombia, but in these other countries too. So this is one of the containers. It's not the only one, but it's one of the containers that has the shape of a gourd. Now let's see if we can see the other one that I was trying to show before. It is this one. So this is another one of the limestone containers. It has the same exact function, but this one, it is a really interesting one because it is the representation of another woman. So you can see here, the woman, she's sitting on a chair. She's holding four birds, 2 birds on each of her hands, and she is very decorated. So if you see here, you can see that she has some details here on top of her head. She's wearing some earrings. She's wearing a nose ring, and she's wearing some other decorations here on her hands and on her legs. So when you look at these pieces that I'm showing you here, what we think, what archaeologists think when they find these pieces is that women had power in these communities too. When we find a lot of representations of women, we think that there was power that was divided between men and women in some parts. This piece that we're looking at right here, it's from a region that is called Quimbaya. So this region, it is where coffee is grown in Colombia. So you get an idea, it would be where Medellin is and where all of the coffee is grown underneath that. So it's a very big area, and it has some of the pieces that are the bigger pieces of the collection. They are very shiny and they are very golden compared to the other pieces. So it seems that the idea of the different shades and the different colors that I'm showing you, it had to do with some type of belief. So it was not only about creating gold pieces, but actually about creating gold pieces that represented something else. So one of the most important things that we think was happening here when we look at these pieces is that they were supposed to be representing something else. So when we look at gold, we're not looking only at a metal, but we're looking at a representation of the sun. So when you look at these pieces, you'll see that they have these very golden tones. So it is supposed to represent this energy, this very masculine energy and the energy of the sun. And when we find other pieces that look very pinkish or reddish, they have a lot more copper content in them. And the idea behind copper, it is that copper represents something feminine. It has something to do with blood, sometimes because of the smell, and also that it has to do with the earth. So by combining these different metals, you are combining different energies. And that is something that is very important when we look at these pieces. We're not looking only at objects, but we're looking at pieces that are supposed to be alive and that are supposed to have power. So this is another container. This one doesn't have the stick like the other one that I showed you. This one is missing the stick. That happens with a lot of the pieces because of how they were found. Sometimes they have the stick, sometimes they don't. But it is the same container. And this would be the base of the container. I always imagine someone holding the container by the base and then using it. And let me just go back. If you were looking at the hands, I was showing you birds. And this is a subject that appears a lot in the pieces of the museum. There's a lot of animals, more than plants. Like if you go to a museum, you'll see there's thousands of animals, not a lot of plants. And I will show you one of the plants in a little while, but I'm going to show you some of the animals that we have in the collection because they are really incredible too. So remember, if you have questions or comments, just let me know. I'm checking the chat. So let me show you this one. So the piece that we see right here, when people look at this piece, usually they believe that is some type of bear. And the thing with thinking that it's a bear is that here in Colombia, we do have some bears, but they are not so big and they don't have those type of teeth. So we think that it could be something similar or something different, something, an animal that is closer to a feline. So we think that this is someone that is actually dressed to look more like a feline and that it could be a jaguar. So there's a lot of representations of jaguars here in the museum, and that could be one of these. Now, what is very interesting about this piece, it is that it is a piece that is a musical instrument. So this piece will be something similar to a flute. It will make this type of flute sounds. And it's difficult to see here because we're only looking at the front of the piece. But if you look at the back from the piece, you will see that it has some holes. So I don't have the picture of the back here on this one, but you can see there's a little hole here in the center. And that also was for the circulation of the air and to make sounds. But it's all like a belly button too. So just to see here all of the different decorations and all of the different patterns that we have here, you can see there they are a mix of the human characteristics because we see again tattoos and we see that this person was dressed, but we also on the face we can see that this person was probably wearing some type of mask because of the teeth, and that this person was also wearing some type of nose piece. So it could be, of course, both things that we're looking at the same time. And that it would be a musical instrument. Of course, we don't know how music sounded 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, but you can still hear the sounds from these pieces and try to, of course, imagine what this sound could be, even though we don't know exactly the music that people were playing. So just with keeping in the subject of showing you jaguars, because they are one of the most important animals that we're going to find here in the collection, I'm going to show you a nose ring in the shape of a jaguar. It's somewhere at the end. I don't see it right now. It's not loading. Okay, well, let's try another one. So this is a piece that goes on the chest. And this is called a chest plate. So if you look at the piece, you will see that it has these two little holes on the top. So this is supposed to, we imagine that people were just using some type of twine and then putting it through the holes and then hanging the piece on your chest. But then you can see that there's this animal right here. So this is not only a jaguar because it has the face of a jaguar, but it's also something else. So I can show you the face and you can see it has, of course, the nose of a jaguar. You can see the little eyes, you can see the ears and the teeth, one of the most important characteristics of the jaguar. But then you can see that, of course, the hands are not the hands of the jaguar, are not the paws of a jaguar, but the body, it's a whole different animal. And this is something that happens a lot in the pieces of the museum. Sometimes you find a lot of jaguars, but also you find combinations of different animals. It seems that it was something important for the people that were making the pieces to try to create animals and to try to create these beings that were a combination of animals that could fly, animals that could swim. And of course, by wearing this piece, you're not only supposed to be wearing this piece and people admire you, but it is supposed to represent that you can also have these powers. When you see these pieces of the collection, the idea of the pieces is that they were supposed to give power to people. So this is not something only that you wear, so you can show people, that is important, but it's supposed to also give you power because of the material and because, of course, of the ceremonies. So this is one that is a mix of all of these things. And this one, it's from a region that is called Tierra Adentro. This is in the Cauca region. So this is the southwest of Colombia. And it is an area where a lot of indigenous people still live. I think that I saw the nose ring that I was going to show you. So let me just go back to it. It's right here. Well, it seems there's a question here. Well, it seems that some people believed that there were some, like there's more combinations of jaguars and caimans. There's a lot of them, but it doesn't seem that there was only one group of people that actually were doing this. So it seems that there were people all over the place combining different animals. Another type of animal that we find a lot is the idea of combining birds and jaguars too. So the idea was to combine maybe different powers of the animals. So maybe some of them could fly and they could swim at the same time and they could run at the same time. So that's kind of more of the idea. But there's not like specific people that were using specific animals, because in Colombia, like there's like more like periods of time where people were more obsessed with some animals and not other types of animals. That's something that happens, but it's not kind of defined by the area. It's more defined by the different periods of time. So there are periods of time in some regions where everything is about the birds. And then 700 years is all about bats. So it depends, it's kind of the ideas of the time. But it was, of course, a very long periods of time where people were obsessed with some of the animals. So this is the nose ring that I was going to show you. This nose ring is really, really amazing, really special. If you look at it's right here, what we have right here, this is the little thing that would go on your nose. So if you think of this piece, it's actually very big. It's like this big. So if you wear the piece, it is supposed to cover all of your face. So you don't see people very well, people don't see you very well. And it is supposed to represent one of these jaguars that I was mentioning before. I don't know if you can see there, but there's the 4 legs of the jaguar. There's the little, like the very long ears. There's the eyes. And inside the eyes, you can see there's a green stone. And then on the nose ring, there's another nose ring. So if you look at the nose of the jaguar, it doesn't look like the nose of a jaguar. It looks more like a human nose. And that human nose is also wearing a nose ring. So it is like nose ring within a nose ring that is supposed to represent a jaguar. And then if you see, this piece is broken. Well, that's one of the most interesting things. And when you go to a museum and you go and look at the piece, you don't see it. It's very difficult to see. But with this picture, you can see where this piece was broken, like this leg was completely broken, and they fixed it. And that is something that was happening with a lot of the pieces that is really amazing, that sometimes these pieces were broken, sometimes these pieces were broken from the beginning, like from when they were making the piece, they were broken, or sometimes they were broken just because people were using it so much. But people believed that they had so much power and that they were so important that they fixed it, and then it can live for another 1,000 years. So this is something incredible of this piece, that you can see how they fixed it, and it's missing one of the little kind of pieces of gold that they were using to fix it. So one of them was completely lost, but then you can see the rest. And there was a lot of work going on in this piece, because if you look at the piece, you will see that all these little round things, they are supposed to represent the spots of the jaguar. They are supposed to, they kind of carved all of this and then they put them again. So imagine all these people working for we don't know how long to actually be able to create these type of pieces. So it is a really interesting piece. And I always try to get people to imagine wearing this piece on your face, how it would look, how it would feel. I know that sometimes people ask me like, how much does it weigh? They are not so heavy as they look, because actually the pieces that you see here, they are very thin. So most of the pieces of the collection, even though that of course they would be heavier and they would be difficult to wear, they are not as heavy as we would imagine, because they were created to be very thin pieces. So sometimes they are just like 1 millimeter thick, maybe 2 millimeters thick, and that would be everything. So that was just something to keep in mind as a reference. And of course, the idea that people were wearing these pieces, that they were wearing masks, and that all of this is supposed to represent, of course, the rank of the person that was wearing it. Let me just show you another piece. So keeping in with the subject of the pieces that people were wearing, this is not the only type of pieces that people were wearing. They were wearing a lot of different pieces besides the nose rings. They were wearing ear pieces and they were wearing chest pieces too. So I'm going to show you one of the ear pieces. These are some of the earpieces that people were wearing. These are some of the most ornate earrings that we have in the collection. They are really incredible. Let me just get closer to this one so you can appreciate all the details. This piece is from Santa Marta again, and this piece, it has a lot of things going on. So if you look on each side, you will see that there's like 2 different heads. We think that these heads could represent snakes, because in Santa Marta, there's a lot of different motifs of snakes. So people say dragons, of course, because that happens in many communities around the world. People believed in dragons, but we here believe that probably they could be snakes. And there's a lot of snakes. And the idea of snakes, not only for people in Colombia, but in other parts of South America, is the idea of eternity in a way. So it's not one snake, but it is a 2-headed snake. So the idea of the 2-headed snake is that it's kind of this the thing that it ends, but it never, like it begins, but it never ends. It is like this idea of something that is eternal and that is supposed to go round and round and round. So that's kind of the idea of using snakes in a lot of motifs, because a lot of indigenous peoples believe that it has to do with this idea of something eternal and the idea of the 2-headed snake, even though that, of course, this is not something that actually exists in nature, but it's the idea that is what it's supposed to represent. So this is an earring. So imagine this earring. These ones are a little bit bigger than the ones that I was showing you before, the other pieces. So these are a little bit bigger. But what is really impressive about these pieces is the technique. It's how they were making these pieces. Because if you look at this piece, there's a lot of things happening. You can see there's like a plaid detail right here, and all of this detail right here, all of the little circles, plus the snakes. So what we know about this technique it is that is called the lost wax technique. So imagine that what people were doing here is that first they were taking wax from the bees. So you go to the bees, you take their beeswax, and you create all of this first in beeswax. Once you have done that, then you start to cover all of that with clay. So imagine layers and layers and layers of clay until you have an outside mold. So imagine like a round mold on top of the wax mold. Once you have that, then you wait for the clay to dry, and then you heat it up. Once you heat it up, all the wax that was inside melts, and it leaves you with a negative imprint of the mold inside. And then you can, of course, melt your metals. And like I was mentioning before, you melt your gold with your copper, and then you pour it inside the mold. Once you do that, you wait for all of that to finish and to cool off. Then you break the clay mold and you get the piece out. And then, of course, you have to polish it. Don't imagine that this is how the pieces look when you make them. Once you make them, they look a very different color, and people have to polish them. So the way that people were polishing them, what we think was happening, they were using some type of sand, or they were using some type of stones to actually create these very shiny pieces. So imagine making one of these pieces or two pieces, and that they look, of course, so incredible, and that they look almost identical. But of course, with this technique, it is impossible to make identical pieces. This is only, and you only get one. So with this technique, you make one piece and you break the mold, and you're not able to make another piece that is identical again. So that is something that is very incredible about the lost wax technique. You only have one chance to do it right. And if you don't do it right, then you have to start over and create another mold and create all of this. So that's what's happening too. Don't believe that every time that people were making these pieces, they all worked out. We have in the museum, we have some molds that didn't work out. We have some other things that were just abandoned. So we know that people were, that there were many people working at the same time. You can see sometimes with the pieces that they have different styles. So there were many people working at the same time, and that people worked very hard to get these pieces, and that they didn't work all the time. But when they worked, we get pieces like these ones that are just really, really incredible and really amazing. So these are some of the earrings that I was mentioning before. So imagine someone wearing the nose ring, and then the earrings, and then a chest plate like the one I showed you before. So imagine people wearing all these pieces at once. And of course, wearing a jaguar skin, maybe some jaguar tattoos all over their bodies, long fingernails, sharp teeth. That would be everything that they were wearing at once. So let me show you this one right here. If you look at this piece, it looks very different from the other pieces that I was showing you. This one looks very, very different because if you look at the piece, you will see that it's a different material. So this is not a gold piece. This is silver and copper. And what happens with copper is that copper oxidizes. And that is one of the most important things when you look at these pieces in the museum. It is that the gold pieces that we have are all mixed with copper. So if you mix gold with copper, it makes it stronger, but in the long run, it will make it weaker because copper oxidizes. So this is what happened here with this piece. It is silver, but then it was combined with the copper, and because it's been so long, and because it has a huge amount of copper, it looks green now. So all of these little green details are supposed to look like this. This piece, what the archaeologists think, it is that it was supposed to be worn on the forehead. So imagine that it has the two little holes here. You pass twine through them, and then you wear it on your forehead. It will be this big, like this big, and that is supposed to look like this. So imagine that in some places they were using silver, only the south of Colombia. This piece comes from a region that is called Nariño, and this is the only place where people were using silver. In other parts of Colombia, they were not using silver, but in Nariño, they were using silver, and we have some pieces, but then you can see what happens with the pieces that have silver and copper. And of course, very different to gold. Gold is supposed to be eternal. And that is one of the most important things about gold when you think about it, when you think why people were so interested in gold, why we are still so interested in gold. And it has to do with this idea that gold, it just, nothing happens to it. It's going to last forever. And that, of course, is something that human beings have always been attracted to, this idea of things that can last forever, opposed to our own lives that, of course, are so short. So this is something that happens a lot with these pieces that are made from other materials. But if you look at the gold pieces, of course, they are just incredible and they just keep the same shine. Some people always ask me, like, how do they clean the pieces in the museum? They don't use anything chemical to clean them. They only clean them if they have to, like with some type of cloth, but they try to not do anything with the pieces. Let's say 50 years ago, 70 years ago, things were different because people believed that they needed to make these objects look as new. So people were applying things, doing things to the pieces, but of course, things have changed and people have discovered that the best thing to do with these pieces is just to, of course, take care of them, but don't do anything that cannot be undone. So this is something that is very, very important. These objects are how you are looking at them. This is exactly how they look. There's nothing that was done to them to actually change how they are supposed to look. This object, it's a very interesting object from the same part in the south of Colombia, Nariño. It is called a rotating disc. So if you look at it has a little hole in the center, and it is a mix of gold and copper, exactly like the other objects. But this is more incredible because the way that they made this object, it includes using acids from plants. So it is something really incredible because if you look at this piece, you will see that there's, of course, the golden tone, there's a brown tone, and then there's like a lighter brown and a darker brown. So if you look at all of the pieces, the different colors that we have here, what people were doing, or what we think that they were doing, because of course we don't know for sure, but what some documents have shown us, and of course what archaeologists have been studying, is that they were using some type of acid from a plant. So imagine first that you get your gold and your copper. You mix your gold, you mix your copper. Now you have your mix of gold and copper. You have to cool it down very fast, and then you have to hammer it until you get this round piece. So you get a golden piece. Once you have your golden piece, then what you do is that you put it on the fire again. Once you put it on the fire again, all of the copper that was inside the piece reacts with the oxygen, and all of the piece becomes brown. So now all of the oxide, it's on top. And then what they were doing is that they were taking a plant. This plant is not a very exotic plant. It is just clovers, like the clovers that you find everywhere in the grass. You mix clovers with hot water and salt, and you get something that is called oxalic acid. And once you have this oxalic acid, then you can pour it on the different surfaces of the disc. And then some people say that they were using some type of stencils. So imagine putting a stencil and putting the acid in some parts, or some other people are saying that they were scratching it. After putting the acid, then you scratch it with some type of tool, and that's how you get this design. So this is something incredible because it is not only creating a gold piece with copper, but it is also using chemistry to, of course, remove the different oxides that were just put there by burning the piece again. So it is something that is really amazing, but the most amazing thing about this disc is not the technique. The most amazing thing, it is that we believe that people were using this disc to get hypnotized. So the idea behind what the people that I was telling you about before, the chiefs and the shamans, is that the power that they have, it has to do with nature, and it has to do with controlling nature and controlling the cycles of nature. So one of the ways that you can achieve that, it is by holding these ceremonies where you're supposed to connect with the gods, where you're supposed to connect with the different layers of the universe. So One important thing about the idea of how indigenous people were thinking, some indigenous communities think about the world today, it is that this is not the only layer of the universe. There's many layers to the universe, and there are some people that have the abilities and the training to travel to different layers of the universe. So one of the ways that you can achieve that, and you can actually travel and connect with the spirits of the animals, it is by actually getting hypnotized. So it's not only getting hypnotized by the disc, because what we think was happening with the disc, it is that it has the hole there in the center, you pass twine through it, and then you make it go round and round and round. And then if you look at the disc, if you concentrate long enough on the disc, then the image is going to get you hypnotized. But of course, some people can do that. But another thing that people were doing is that they were using many different plants. So I talked about coca leaves before, but there were other plants that are supposed to be helping people with this. So one of these plants is called yopo, and there's another beverage that is called yahe. It's a mix of different plants. And these plants are supposed to make you feel like you're outside of your body, like you feel like you can fly. You see all of these different lights of colors, and it is an effect that is supposed to make you feel like you can connect with these other layers of the universe. So imagine people that were in ceremonies, dressed with all of the objects that I have shown you, and then using this type of pieces to connect with the different layers. It is not so impossible to think that people were actually turning themselves into jaguars or into birds if you think about all of the factors that were going on here. And this is, of course, one of the pieces that we think that it was supposed to help you with that. Let me just go back. And I'm going to show you my favorite piece of the collection, because it is one of the most amazing pieces that we have. It's not this one. So this is my favorite piece of the whole collection. This is a really amazing piece. It is called the Batman, just like the superhero, because this is supposed to be someone that became a bat. So what we're looking at here, it is someone that is supposed to be a bat. And there's a lot of things happening in this piece. This piece, it is also a chest plate. So imagine that this piece goes on the chest. It's difficult to see it right here because it has some little things behind, a little holes, and you're supposed to pass twine through the holes and then wear this piece on your chest. So this piece, it is supposed to be a chest plate. It is worn on the chest, and it is supposed to be showing us someone that was becoming a bat, but a lot more things. So if you look at the piece, you will see first, there's a human face, there's the body, but here on top, you can see two birds. So there's two birds. Behind the birds, there's some decorations. Some people see wings, some people see feathers, some people see butterflies, but it seems that they were supposed to have like kind of this bird motif. And then on the face, there's a lot more decorations and things happening. So I think this is the most interesting thing, is the face of this guy. So it looks like a very scary person. It looks something very different from what we're used to, and it is because it is supposed to be a bat. So this piece comes from a region that is called Tayrona. This is in Santa Marta again. And in this region, there's a mountain, Sierra Nevada of Santa Marta. This is one of the most unique ecosystems in the world. Only in this region, there are 70 species of bats. So imagine that these people were surrounded by bats, and of course that they believed that these bats were so important that they wanted to become a bat themselves. So what we're looking at here is someone that is wearing a little crown. If you look, here's a little crown, and he has these small ears, and he has like this little kind of hat. It looks like a hat, but it is because some bats in this region, they look like that. They look like as if they were wearing little hats. And then you can see here the eyes, and then you can see the nose. This is not a regular nose, this is a nose ring. So imagine that this nose ring, it is two little rolls of metal. They look as it was one roll of metal that was folded, looks like two little tubes. It goes across the nose. You need to have your nose pierced. And then they lift the nose up. They make you look like those bats that look like little pigs. And then you can see another piece. It is this piece that goes here on the chin. So you need to have, again, another type of piercing here, and then another hole. So that would, of course, make you look a little bit different, more like a bat. And besides that, this guy is wearing some earrings. He's wearing something on the chest, and he's holding a two-headed snake again in his hands. So this is what we believe is the shaman from Santa Marta, and it is called the Batman. What happens with these Batmans, there's some stories that are associated with them. And it is that when the Spanish came, they met some of these people, and they told them that the process to become one of those shamans, it was to actually live inside a cave, that you were supposed to avoid eating salt, eating chilies, eating meat, that there was a whole life of training to actually become one of these Batmen. So I always imagine people wearing all these different pieces, but besides that, of course, just wearing these pieces and looking like a bat and living inside a cave. Imagine all of that. So how often were they used? Well, we think that like most of there's pieces that you can see that people were wearing them like all the time. And some of the stories that the Spanish tell is that when they got here and when they got to Santa Marta, everyone was wearing any gold pieces. So it seems that there were some pieces that were worn all the time, that you wear them every day. But it seems that there are some other pieces that were only worn in special occasions, and also that there were some pieces that were only created to be buried with people because they don't have any other signs of wear. So it seems that there's like different categories of pieces, just like we have our clothes for our everyday life and our clothes for special occasions. So it seems that there was kind of this difference within these pieces too. So imagine that, and that's one of the other things that is important to know about the collection. It is that these pieces, they were not found by archaeologists. When you go to a museum like the Gold Museum, and it's an archaeological museum, you think that these pieces were found by archaeologists, but this is not the case. 95% of the pieces that we have in the Gold Museum, they were not found by archaeologists, but they were found by treasure hunters. So people that were looking for gold because they wanted to become rich. And that is something that we have had for a long time here, since of course the Spanish people came just looking for gold. And then in the 19th century and the 20th century, there's people that their only goal in life is to find gold and sell it, or sometimes melt it. But some of these people discovered that they could actually sell the pieces and make money just selling the pieces, and not only the gold pieces, but ceramics too. So most of these pieces were found by these people, these treasure hunters. They were sold to private collectors, and then the Central Bank of Colombia, Banco de la República, the owner of the museum, actually bought the pieces from private collectors and bought the pieces from these people to actually have this collection. So that means that we don't know as much as we would like to know about the pieces, about the objects. So that is something important to know, that of course these pieces are known, and the information that we have about them, it is not the information that archaeologists got from the places where they were found, actually, because we don't know, but we have information about other places or newer excavations, but we don't have the exact location where these pieces were found. So now I'm going to show you one of the most famous pieces of the collection. And this is one of the pieces that people go and find. and this is one of the most famous pieces. It is the piece that was mentioned at first. This is one of the most famous pieces. People from all over the world try to go and check it out. It has been on coins, it has been on notes, on bills, it is on some cookies that are called quimbaya. It is absolutely everywhere. And if you ask any Colombian, they will tell you that it is one of the most famous pieces that they know. It is called Poporo Quimbaya. It is one of these pieces that became very important because it is one of the first pieces that started the collection. So, like I was telling you before, these pieces were found by people that were looking for gold. And this is what happened with this piece. This piece was found by someone, and then in the 19th century in Antioquia, where Medellin is. That's all we know about the piece. Someone found it in Antioquia in the 19th century, and then the owner of the piece, the person that bought the piece, it was one of the richest guys in Colombia in the 19th century. He was the owner of many gold mines, and then he had it with him for almost all of his life until he died. He gave it to his daughter, and then at the beginning in the 1940s, this lady didn't want this container anymore, and she sold it to the museum, and that's how the museum started the collection. So before that, there was no museum. It was only the bank, the Central Bank of Colombia. The bank had some pieces of gold, and because the bank was the only entity that was allowed to buy gold, they bought the gold, and they bought this piece. And they decided at this time that they were not going to just buy gold, but that they were going to actually start a collection. It was not a museum at the time, it was a collection. So they start to buy pieces and pieces and pieces. In the next 10 years, they have 4,000 pieces. And once they have these 4,000 pieces, they don't have any more space where to have them because it was the bank. So imagine that at the beginning, this piece was in the boardroom of the bank. So the only people that actually saw these pieces were the people that worked at the bank, and that was it. So they started to realize that they needed a bigger space, that the collection was growing, and they were actually interested in getting to know more about the pieces. So they started to hire people. There were no archaeologists at the time here in Colombia. There were just people that were studying things. So they got people to actually go to different countries, study archaeology. Then some archaeologists from other places came here, and they started to actually look at the pieces and study the pieces. So it was a whole thing. They started this collection, and then of course they decided that they needed to actually have a building for the collection. So the building that we have in Bogota was built in 1968, and it was created only to have this collection. That is something that is really incredible about this, and it is of course that this building was created to hold this specific collection. So if you look at the piece that we have right here, it is a limestone container, just like the limestone container that I showed you at the beginning. It has the same function to hold limestone from seashells to mix with coca leaves on the mouth. So that's kind of the same idea. It is a limestone container. This one doesn't have the little stick that I was telling you about before, because again, sometimes you don't get the sticks. This one came alone. So it was only this one. And then it is really incredible because they used the same technique that I was talking about before, the same lost wax technique. So imagine this object. This one, it's a little bit bigger than the other ones that I have showed you. So imagine that it's like something like this, and it weighs 700 grams. So this is a limestone container that I'm not very sure that actually you can use in your everyday life, because it would be a very heavy container to carry around. And this is where maybe the question about when if people were using these objects all the time comes again, because I don't know if this piece was used every day because it weighs so much, or maybe someone was actually using it every day, or maybe someone was using it only on special occasions, or maybe no one used it, and when a chief died, they were buried with this piece. It is very difficult to know exactly, but this is one of the limestone containers. It has some amazing details right here. You can see that it has this little strip going all around it. And then you can see the base. This container was not created in one mold, but it seems that it was two different stages. So the base that you see right here, this was created in the same lost wax technique, but at a different time. And then it was, you can see right here that a little bit of the different shade, and then the other part was created. So created in two different stages using the same lost wax technique that I talked about before. So if you want to learn more about the lost wax technique, there's a video on the YouTube channel of the museum, and it kind of shows you exactly how they go about creating these objects. So this one probably was a very difficult object to create, and it is an amazing object, and that is in that still people use the same type of objects. Because if you go to Santa Marta, again, you will find that indigenous people there still have limestone containers to chew coca leaves, even though they are not these limestone containers made of gold. They are limestone containers made of gourds or pumpkins or vegetable materials, but they still have the same idea of a container that represents fertility, a container that is supposed to help you with chewing coca leaves, and it is supposed to help you with ceremonies. So let me just show you the last piece. It is this one. This is another one of the very important pieces of the collection, the most famous pieces of the collection. This piece is called Balsa Muisca, the Muisca raft, and it is supposed to represent a ritual. So one thing that happened here when the Spanish came to this area of Colombia, to Bogota and around us, they had an idea on their mind. They had an idea that someone told them about rituals and about a place that was made of gold, El Dorado. So this little piece that you see here, it is supposed to represent that ritual. So what we have about the ritual, it is some documents. What it says is that this ceremony was supposed to be the chief covered himself with some type of honey, and then he was all covered with gold dust. So he was completely golden. He had, of course, all of these gold pieces. He was wearing the gold pieces. He was carrying some emeralds, cotton, all of these offerings to the gods. So imagine someone having all of these pieces, wearing all of these pieces, getting into a little raft, then using the raft to get to the center of a lake. And this was related, this idea of this ceremony, it is very connected to a very specific place that is called Guatavita. It is a little lake that we have 2 hours from here, from Bogota. So they believed that they were going to find this El Dorado place inside Guatavita, and that it had to do with this ceremony where the chief threw himself into the lake, threw all these gold pieces, threw all of these emeralds as offerings to the gods. So imagine that that was kind of the first thing, that people were, of course, offering these gifts to the gods, that the gods were supposed to be, of course, happy to receive all of these gold pieces and all of these emeralds and all of these sometimes human sacrifices and animal sacrifices, and that in this way all the life was going to continue. One of the most important things about this ceremony, it was that idea, and that it still happens today. It is the idea that you offer something to the gods, that you offer something to the earth, and that the earth is going to compensate you back. So when we look at this piece, it is supposed to be telling us all about that. There's 11 people on top. There's people wearing jaguar masks, like the jaguar masks that we saw before. There's the tall guy that's supposed to be the chief. There's some people, of course, if you look at them, they are the rafters. So this piece is supposed to be representing all of these things, all these rituals that were happening. And of course, when the Spanish came, they believed that they were going to find inside the lake, that they were going to find El Dorado. And they tried to drain the lake. And they drained the lake many, many times. The last time that people tried to drain this lake, it was 1911. So imagine, like a little over 100 years ago, people were still looking for this magical place, this endless amount of gold that they were never going to happen, because we don't have that amount of gold here. it was never going to happen, but of course it created on the minds of people this idea of endless riches and of course getting all of these pieces. So this piece was not found inside the lake, it was found inside a cave, it was found by a peasant, and it was sold to a museum 50 years ago. So this is one of the pieces that of course is still people look for. People really like this piece. It's a small piece, don't believe that it's a very huge piece, it is a very small piece. It was created using the same lost wax technique that I explained before. And of course, it is one of the most incredible pieces that you can find here in Colombia and in the world. There's nothing like it. So of course, it is one of the most important ones. So this is the last thing that I wanted to show you. And that's it. Thank you very much.
So Luisa, thank you very much for this rich explanation about all of the gold pieces from the Gold Museum. I would like to ask if it's possible for the attendees to like watch this again, these pieces through online. Is it possible?
Yes, you can visit Google Arts and Culture, Museo del Oro, and you will find all of these pieces. And of course, you can go to the website of Museo del Oro or the YouTube channel, and you can find a lot of this information there too.
So thank you very much for sharing all this knowledge about the Gold Museum. And thank you to all of the attendees. Do you have any questions? So I think there are no questions. It was very explanatory. So thank you, Luisa. And we will have another cultural session next Friday. It will be in Spanish. And as well, we will have another one for Rio Guaviare. Thank you very much.